Hey, Carrie.
Hi, Jeff.
Is Evan lurking around somewhere?
Evan?
I'm here.
Hey, Evan, who's going to be doing the presentation from Rincon?
That is Camila Bobroff.
Would you like to introduce her?
Yeah, sure.
I see Michael Hendricks here. Hi, Michael.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Looking forward to, good. Welcome to the team. Looking forward to hearing your presentation today.
Sure, and good meeting you all.
Carrie, I see that Michael LePage is here. Do you know anything about the others by any chance?
I know Scott.
Oh, there's Lynette.
Lynette? I haven't heard from anybody else. I'm expecting everybody.
Scott won't be here.
Oh, Scott won't?
Yep. He emailed on yesterday.
He what?
He contacted on yesterday. He's out of town.
Hi, Nancy. Phew. Let's see, how about, we're missing, oh, John's here. Okay. Hi, John.
Hi, everybody.
All right. Lynette's here. Hi, Lynette.
Hello.
Do you think we should get started, Jeff?
I think we have everybody. I know Agnes is out, and I just heard that Scott's out. So I guess we should get started. Committee members are here. So hello, welcome everyone to the October 21st meeting of the Carmel Climate Change Committee. Call this meeting to order, and we'll note that Scott is out, but everybody else is here. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak on matters of municipal concern that are not on the agenda? Okay, not hearing anyone, we'll move on to commissioner announcements.
Should we announce about our work?
All right, so.
Should we announce about our planned workshop for our next meeting?
I'm sorry?
Should we announce what our planned workshop is for the next meeting on November 18th?
Would you like to do that?
Sure. Next month, our climate change meeting on November 18th at 3:30, we're having a more formalized workshop that is going to hopefully get people to participate in our action plan. Right, Jeff?
That's right. So we're going to talk a little bit about the changes today. The first order of business, we're going to talk about the changes that we've made so far from the first draft. Thank you very much, Rincon Associates, to the action plan that we've started to put together. And next month, we're going to hopefully take it to a whole new level with members of the community speaking to different items on that in that plan.
And we're looking for a lot of public input on that. So it's going to be focused on the action plan and what we're suggesting as ways to what Carmel can do to help with the climate change issue.
And with that, we'll move on to the first order of business, which is review the revised draft list of adaptation strategies for Carmel. And I see that our consultant has just appeared, Ms. Bobroff.
Hi,
Evan,
yes.
Evan, do you have anything you'd like to say? Have I done that to your satisfaction?
I'm very satisfied. Just as a reminder, last month we went over the first draft of the adaptation strategies. The committee and the public provided some comments, and our consultants have come back with a response to our comments and are here to present that update.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I've just tried to share my screen, but it looks like I am not able to. Can you give me permission?
This is my first time hosting, so give me one. Oh, I found it. All right, try now.
Great. Okay. So hi, everyone. I'm really glad to be here again. My name is Camila Bobroff, and I am a sustainability planner with Rincon Consultants. I was here last month, so I'm sure most of you remember. First of all, I really just want to thank everyone for your thorough review of the potential adaptation goals, policies, and actions that we developed. We've received a lot of great comments from this group, and we've revised the list of potential adaptation actions with your help and Agnes's help as well. So the purpose of my short presentation today is really to summarize the changes that were made on this strategy. Great. So real quick, you should have received these two main resources. One is the summary of comments and responses spreadsheet, which includes all the comments we received, who made those comments, and our responses to each of those. And the other is the revised potential adaptation strategies, which is updated as described in that. So we've grouped comments into 5 main categories for this presentation, just to make things a little simpler. These are listed based on the number of comments received. So we received several comments about electrification actions and issues with evacuation, traffic, and congestion. There's also a desire for more actions to address vulnerable populations. And there's tree maintenance and protection of Monterey pines, which was also a concern. And lastly, there was a request to include actions to reduce stormwater runoff and address wastewater. So in the next few slides, I'll provide an overview of how we addressed these categories of comments. And I also want to mention that we received other comments about rewording and reorganizing, and we've addressed those as well. I'm just not going to review it, but you can see those in that first spreadsheet that we sent.
Camila?
Yep.
In the interest of sort of fostering at least a little bit of a dialogue here, would you like for us to comment save all of our comments until the very end? Or since you've have your presentation here in 5 categories, if we have any comments, would you like us to make them after each of the categories?
You know, that might be helpful. So yeah, let's stop at the end of each kind of of these 4 categories, and you can have your input. And then also at the end, we can just open it up again in case there are things that I didn't mention that you want to bring up. So let's do it that way. That's a great idea.
Why don't I let you, you can just ask for input. We tend to be pretty freewheeling here. So if we have members of the public on the line that wish to comment in these categories, we'll just sort of let them speak up as well after you ask after each category.
Great. Thank you. All right, so I'll start with electrification. This is where we received most of the comments. And most comments were about the types of mention that these types of actions should be included in the climate action plan rather than in an adaptation document. And we did receive one comment that supported including these sorts of actions because of the health risks associated with, for example, wood burning, fireplaces, or natural gas use. So we've noted that some of the members of the climate committee would prefer to move these types of actions to the climate action plan, but we've also kept them in this broader list of actions to have the public weigh in on them at that November 18th workshop. And so I can kind of pause here, and if anybody wants to provide input at this point on the electrification, the way we've addressed this electrification concern. Yeah, Jeff.
I have a question for you. So I'm gonna repeat this back. I'm gonna repeat what I heard back to you. So you said you left this in there so that we would get public comment at the November 18th meeting, which I agree is a good idea. Is the goal then after the November 18th meeting to sort of take those comments and shuttle them over to Mr. Hendricks's climate action plan, or to just sort of decide what to do with them at that point?
Yeah, I think the plan was to kind of review any comments from that public meeting, and also knowing the comments that we received from you all, and reduce the list so that it's a final list. And then exactly like you said, if it seems the public is also not interested in having electrification related actions in this adaptation plan, we'll shuttle them over to the climate action plan.
And I would note that electrification is one of the candidate reduction measures in the climate action plan that we'll be presenting a little bit later.
Great. Any other comments or questions on this one?
Yeah, since I'm the person that made the comment, I'll just say, I'll just say to the committee, my purposes for making this comment are, I think that the items that go into the adaptation plan should make Carmel more adaptable to climate change. And right now, our gas supply is more resilient than our electrical supply is. So while I agree with the thrust of making, electrifying our infrastructure wholeheartedly to reduce greenhouse gases, I'm concerned that this action does not make us more resilient, and therefore it doesn't belong in this particular plan. And I'm trying to sort of keep these things straight for the public to avoid confusion as to what we're doing. So that's my MO. So I've just stated it, and thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. Great, I'll move on now to the evacuation, traffic, and congestion. So we received 2 comments expressing concerns about evacuation, and we've added 3 new actions to address these concerns. So action 1.1.5 is to investigate potential congestion issues in the event of an evacuation and develop and maintain a list of residents who may have difficulty evacuating and provide evacuation options for residents with mobility challenges. Action 1.1.6 is to evaluate evacuation route capacity, safety, and viability under a range of emergency scenarios and identify and implement mitigation actions. So this action is really addressing recent wildfire legislation. It's Assembly Bill 747. So a lot of cities are having to do this in their safety element updates, and we thought that this adaptation plan could be a good place to kind of show this, especially with all the evacuation concerns in the city. And then action 1.1.7 is to develop and employ evacuation alternatives and or alternative emergency access routes in neighborhoods that have single ingress and egress. And again, this is addressing some state legislation, Senate Bill 99, which requires cities to do this. And I think that came out of Paradise with, there's a lot of cities in our state that have, one way in and out for certain neighborhoods. And that has been identified as a concern in Carmel as well. So those are the 3 actions that we have added to address the evacuation concerns. Mm-hmm.
Could I make a comment on this one?
Yeah.
I'm very happy that we've added these. I think that evacuation, access, and congestion and education is a really important aspect of our responsibility as a committee to the community, because even generally speaking, not related to climate change.
I frightened you when I came in?
Sorry? I'm sorry?
I think somebody was just coming on. Continue your comments.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Am I muted? I don't think so.
No, you aren't.
Oh, okay. I'm just really delighted that these are in, especially as they relate to the vulnerable communities, those people who don't have access to transportation generally, and to some of the other things that we have added in respect of vulnerable residents. So I'm glad about this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo Lynette's comments. So thank you for putting this in there. And Camila, I would ask you a question. For evacuation alternatives, do you believe that a community like ours should have sort of gathering facilities, and that we should more clearly state what our goals would be as far as places for people to go if they need shelter? So that would probably tend, in this community, that would probably tend to be more of a storm thing than a fire thing. But I'm looking through, I was listening to your words here, and then I'm looking through these actions 1.1 through 1.10, and I'm not sure if that's completely fleshed out.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that could be more fleshed out. Another thing that we've seen in other cities is having a special shuttle service that can actually go and pick up residents with mobility issues, because if folks have mobility issues, it might be difficult for them to even get to a meat gathering facility. So those are some things that the city can consider. I know that adds a specific cost, and I'm not sure that I've seen it implemented yet, but I've seen cities kind of add those as aspirational programs to implement.
Yeah, we're in a pretty unique situation in that I think that most of the people with the mobility issues here, not most, but certainly at least half of the people with mobility issues here live in a particular area of downtown. And it would be fairly easy if we had a plan in place to sort of gather those people and transport them to some sort of facility. So I think it's probably worth, based on what you said, I think it's probably worth adding an action or two to sort of maybe, supplement 1.1.7, which you have on the screen. So addressing sort of, a meeting place, and then sort of a transportation method.
Take note of that.
I had a quick question. Carmel already has an emergency response plan. I'm wondering, is there any overlap on this? And if there is overlap, should there be coordination between the two plans?
Yeah, there should absolutely be coordination among the two plans. I have not looked at it specifically while developing these actions, but usually emergency response plans are a little more high level. But I will go and look at that and make sure that it's all aligned. And also it'll be good to be in touch with those who implement that plan and make sure. And I think that'll come after, as well as we decide on the lead for each of these actions, who will be implementing them. I'm sure that'll come from the emergency response kind of team, and it'll be good to have buy-in and make sure that all of these align. So I'll write that down as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Any other comments on these actions? Okay, if you think of something, we'll leave some time at the end too. Okay, great. So we received 2 requests to include more actions on vulnerable populations. And so I've added these two, as well as the one that you saw in the transportation, which also addresses vulnerable populations. Action 1.2.4, Social Support Network, is to collaborate with the Carmel Foundation and other community-based organizations to develop an inventory of locations with isolated seniors and people with disabilities and develop a plan for a social support network to increase resilience to climate change. And action 1.2.5, backup power for vulnerable populations, coordinate with 3CE, PG&E, and emergency management services to establish backup power and emergency grid shutdown protocols that protect the most vulnerable. So I can open it up.
Again, I'm really happy to see that we have upped our visibility of concerns and awareness about our vulnerable populations. The fact that it's now showing up in this social network, the backup power, the evacuation planning, and then ultimately there's another part that talks about a resilience center. I think that all of those are responsive to the committee's concern about vulnerable populations. And based on input that we will shortly be receiving from the Carmel Foundation and residents in their residential facilities, I think it will help us understand better how to actually implement some of these suggested actions.
I have a question for you, Camila. On 1.2.5, what do other communities tend to use for backup power, like the specifics of electricity for vulnerable populations?
That's a great question, and I'll have to talk to Ryan Gardner, who was here last time. He's our electrification guru lead. So I'll get some more specifics on that, and we can add it to the action.
Okay, it would be great. I would say that we, have been sort of, we've discussed having a microgrid here, but we seem to have a problem with no real source of electricity generation at this point, since it's not particularly sunny here and we're not quite sure what to do. So this is probably an issue for us, and I think it's a good issue. And I know that I'm certainly interested in how we might solve this problem, but this seems more difficult for us. And so if Ryan or yourself could sort of send us some information about what other communities do, maybe offline, send it to Agnes and Evan, and they'll forward it to the rest of us. I think that would be good.
I know one of the things that Jeff and I learned was that at the Carmel Foundation, they have limited generation capacity that allows for some backup power for their facility. And that might address some issues for a vulnerable population, but it's certainly very limited and doesn't even power their entire complex. It only powers part of it. So we don't have, to my knowledge, we don't have anything else that would even be that broad.
Oh.
I've got a question before we move on. Should we, if people have other comments for a particular section here, should we also take those comments at this time? I know that the committee, had a first look at this plan at our last meeting, but maybe they've looked it over again. And if they have other things that they feel that we should add, I would suggest bringing them up as we go along.
That sounds good. Yep.
Thank you.
I'm open to that. Mm-hmm. So maybe I'll just leave a little bit more time in case anyone wanted to bring anything up right now about the vulnerable populations. Okay. So to address concerns about excluding Monterey pines from a preferred urbanized tree species list, Action 2.1.2 was revised. I've bolded the language, the added language. And so the action now includes considerations of aesthetics and the ecological benefits of natives and near natives. And we've also added maintenance guidelines to the action so that it's not solely focused on planting guidelines. Does anybody want to provide comment on this one?
I would just say great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I much appreciate the added detail. Thank you.
And this is the last slide I have before.
Can I jump in on that one?
Yes, of course.
The masthead on that page was calling out Monterey Pines, but it wasn't exclusive to that, is it? I mean, I see the rest of the words that seem more broad.
Right. Yeah, it's not exclusive to Monterey Pines, so we made it a little broader with natives and near natives.
Okay. All right, good. Just making sure. Thank you.
Okay. Great. And so this is our last slide before I go to the next step slide. So after this one, we can talk about both these two actions, but also any other comments that folks might have on the adaptation strategy as a whole. So these actions address kind of stormwater runoff and wastewater concerns. Action 3.1.3 is to reduce stormwater runoff through implementation of a stormwater diversion project to divert all dry weather flows and first flush runoff to the large sanitary sewer that runs along San Antonio Avenue such that they can be directed to the wastewater district. And this is something that the city has been working on, and I know Agnes is working on getting grant funding to implement this project. And then action 3.1.9 is to collaborate with the Carmel area wastewater district to increase the facility's resilience to sea level rise and stronger storms, and incentivize reduction of water use in the community and transitioning to reclaimed water use for irrigation. We also added a piece to maintain a staff or council personnel as liaisons to the Carmel area wastewater district. Do you have any comments on these two actions or the strategy as a whole?
I have a question. On the stormwater runoff, the first flush runoff from the stormwater system to the sanitary sewer, how does that work? I mean, in other words, you're taking the stormwater system and then valving it or something into the stormwater, or taking the stormwater system and valving it into the sanitary sewer system?
That's a great
first rain of the year, for instance, or something like that. Is that what that means?
Yeah, the way I understood it is that the first rain is the one that's the most causes the most issues with runoff. And for those details on how it will be kind of diverted, I'll have to talk to Agnes because she is the one that has the details on this. I think it's been pretty fleshed out as she just wrote a grant application for it. And I can see that, you know, it probably would be good to make it a little bit more specific so that the public, they may have more questions like you do as well. So I'll write that in there.
Yeah, I will echo what Camila says, and Carrie probably knows about as much as I do about this because it's come up a couple of times. I think that the city is under some sort of deadline to deal with these first flush runoffs and keep them out of the marine sanctuary. And I don't remember exactly when the deadline is. I think it's a few years off, but it involves exactly this, diverting the first, you know, it's exactly what you said, John. It's diverting the first amount of water to the sewer system rather than the ocean. But I think there are two things here. And I think the other one, so one of them is the water that goes, you know, that we see going into the ocean from Carmel Beach. And I think that that's what this stormwater runoff diversion project is really about. That's where we do, you know, if you've ever been out there at the side of the first rain, you'll see people collecting water samples. So that water is tested. tested by a company, and the city has very severe sort of restrictions on what we can do. And as an example, this is why we have the street sweeper. It keeps heavy metals out of that first flush runoff. That's where they all appear, in that runoff. So by capturing the runoff that's 8 months of brake pad metals, we go a long way towards cleaning up our discharges into the ocean. And I think the other thing, I know that somewhere in this plan, there was an item that was related to, I think Evan put it in there, I'm not exactly sure, related to a sort of a perk pond type situation or a runoff lagoon in Rio Park. And I think that's to manage the water that comes down the backside of Carmel. So that's sort of a different problem with a different solution. Is that right, Evan? Anya's probably knows more about it, but I think Evan might know something.
It's not ringing a bell to me, unfortunately.
I think that's one of Scott's comments.
It is.
Yeah.
Scott.
Yeah.
But does this project?
Yeah, there's something going on. There's a stormwater project that's happening on the backside of Carmel too. I think that is different from the front.
We'll get Anya's to fill in the details on that one.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wanted to speak on these items or earlier ones? Okay, I'll move forward. I just have a short next steps slide that will be presenting the goals, policies, and actions at the November 18th meeting, collecting comments from the public, and then once again, refining the goals, policies, and actions based on the public comments and the climate committee comments that we have already received, and if we continue to receive those. So that's all I have in terms of a presentation. I wanted to kind of just reiterate that I've written all of your comments down, and I'll be sending out more information on that backup power. But I've noted that this is a concern for Carmel, and I've noted the piece on the Carmel Foundation as well, having some backup power, but it's very limited. And I'll also reach out to Anya's to kind of fill in the details on those stormwater actions. Unless there are any other comments. Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, what happens after? So we have a matrix of things here. We have a matrix of, for example, goals and policies and actions. But a lot of these actions you mentioned, so for example, you mentioned earlier that some of the actions we were going to sort of assign them to people or assign them to groups, whether it's like, we don't have any control of the Carmel Foundation, but COD or the Planning Commission or city staff or something like that. Does that stuff happen in the?
Oh, I think you were muted at the end there.
Yeah, does that, so how does that step work? Will that happen in the report or?
Yeah, I imagine we haven't talked out these details with Anya's yet. And so Evan, I don't know if you want to chime in too, but the way that I see that happening is in the development of the report. I think it'll be important to have set up meetings with these different stakeholders and get buy-in before we just write their name down as a lead on any of these actions. I think that'll be a really crucial step to understand, having everybody on board and making sure that the actions are really feasible from the perspective of these other agencies or stakeholders as well.
Okay, thank you.
Is this a time to ask questions on things that maybe were not covered in these slides? Okay. Because one of the things, and I can't watch this and pull up my document, but I think it's 1.4.1 and 1.4.2. I just wonder if it's not too bold, ask, are these really realistic here? And are we interested in embracing that kind of initiative? I need to try to find that so that I can say exactly what I wanted to say about it. But it's the one about jobs. Preserving jobs, supporting displaced workers, establishing relationships for training, and so on. And while I personally embrace those kinds of efforts, I think they're very important. I think it's notable if our city decides to do those things. I'm just wondering, do we really think that that's part of what we intend to do?
I'm happy to respond, but I also think this sounds like a question directly to the committee.
Well, I think it is. I think it's something for the committee to talk about, because the reason I'm bringing this up is twofold. One is that one of my assignments was to work out ways to gain input from workers in the city, people, the population that we don't really communicate with and have access to very easily. I met with Carrie about that, and she and I came to an agreement that the best way to reach the employee population is through the chamber and the business owners, and having them be our conduit, if you will, in whatever way they see realistic and workable to do that. So I read this policy with that frame of reference, and I feel like it is important for the committee to talk about it. I would really value your input on what you've seen and what you believe has worked. But I just want us to be realistic and to have only the policies that we believe are appropriate for us to pursue, and we'll gather some buy-in. Carrie, did I capture what you and I talked about fairly?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing it up. So Camila, what do you think?
Yeah, I think most jurisdictions do not address workers at all in their adaptation plans. And I think that's been something that's really lacking. The most recent state's adaptation plan was just released. Well, the draft of it was released, and they do talk about workers in there, and it's becoming, I mean, I think we all knew, but it's becoming more obvious that workers are, they really keep a city going, the economy and all of that. And so I think it's important to include in a plan, but you know, it's a good point that how much control do you have, especially if all of or most of your workers are coming from outside the city. I would see including these actions as sort of like a more progressive and kind of reach actions that Carmel could do to kind of be more of a leader in the space. And again, I think these would be the types of actions that are maybe not fully fleshed out yet, but they intend, you know, the goal is to really move this forward, and you can't, sometimes you have to start these things without knowing exactly how it will work to make progress. Because if they're not included at all, it's a lot harder to make any progress.
Well, if they're not included at all, it's hard to wedge them in somewhere along the way. I agree. I certainly agree with that. Thank you.
Lynette, I have a question for you and Carrie. Maybe for you, but maybe for you and Carrie. When you talk about taking care of the workers, are we talking about facilitating their current jobs? Are we talking about finding them new jobs? Are we talking about putting food on the table? What's the level of what's the level of concern getting people to work? I mean, you know, some of the people, for example, you know, gardeners, it's going to be really difficult to get gardeners here because they have their own equipment and all that. It's much easier to get hospitality workers here, for example, if that's sort of the scope of what we're talking about here. But I would like to hear about, you know, what, you know, of all the things I mentioned or haven't mentioned, and maybe we can do this next time. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. but what's the scope of what we think we can do? You know, I'm most people know me as a progressive, and I'm pretty progressive, and I would probably embrace some of these actions, but I'm not sure yet what exactly we're talking about. I think this is a good discussion. I think this is the discussion we are supposed to be having.
I do too.
But I don't know yet where maybe you could, or we could talk as committee about what exactly we're talking about when we speak about taking care of workers, or if there's a better phrase than taking care of.
Well, I think that the answer to your question is we probably don't know yet. We can imagine certain things about transportation to and from work for people who rely on public transport in the event of emergencies. Getting people here, getting people back to work, which we've seen through the pandemic even, having people want to come back to work. Part of what I talked to Carrie about is that I feel that we would be leaping over an important step if we don't have some way to gain input from the workers themselves. And that was a first step that she and I were talking about. How do we go about that? I know that there are other jurisdictions who've used different methods. They've had employers give employees a postcard with a scan, a visual scan on it to participate in a survey. There have been postings at bus stops and that you can scan with your phone to access a survey. So there are ways to gather information, but I think part of what we need to nail down is what are we looking for? Because the last thing we want to do, I think, is ask people more open-ended questions than we ever intend to address and raise expectations and have there be some kind of disappointment or shortfall in what we do. And it seemed that that was one of the reasons why, and Carrie, I don't want to speak for you, but the conclusion I drew from our discussion was that access through the chamber, business owners to those employees might be the best way for us to proceed, and a dialogue with the chamber might be a good first step about that.
So thank you, Lynette, for summarizing. I think part of the issue is, so on one extreme, if we were an island in the middle of the Pacific, and the ocean level is rising and that island is no longer going to be, that is certainly displacement, right? So in our case, because we don't have that extreme outlook like other sea cities do, I think in terms of the worker, it's more about events that are going to affect the worker. Fires, electrical outages, when the kitchens can't work. So I think from my perspective, it's more event driven than it is, and that has to do with climate change, of course. So the best way of really getting at the workers is through the owners or the managers. And that's kind of what Lynette and I discussed. I think Camila has a point, though. We don't necessarily want to take it out because then it won't be top of mind. Right. And I think that's what she's saying. Does that help, Jeff? Okay.
Yeah, and I think those are great points that first, it's important to receive information from the workers to know what challenges are they facing or do they anticipate facing. I know that some jurisdictions in Southern California, there were issues when there were really big fires in communities and homeowners evacuated because they were forced to evacuate, but they had their workers come to their house and watch their house for them which is, completely an issue for these poor workers who probably should have been evacuating their own homes and definitely shouldn't be going into an evacuation zone to protect
I think the word
someone
is,
else's.
I think the word there is inappropriate, but I won't say.
Yeah, so I don't think these are the same issues here in Carmel, obviously, but that's something that I don't think many people have been thinking about when it comes to climate adaptation, and it's nice to get the conversation started. So
I think Carrie said something that struck me. We think about, and I'm not sure that this is the right path, but we think about climate change and a lot of these things that we are preparing for, some of them are sort of chronic and, rising temperatures and whatnot. And some of them are sort of acute, bigger storms, droughts and whatnot. And when we talk about these, especially, I would hope that the chronic things would be sort of taken care of by industry shifts, changes in a tourism model or what people do when they come into town. And we really wouldn't have to worry about those. But one possibility would be that, we think about these acute actions, like storms or fires or whatnot. We think about it in terms of our residents and maybe, in terms of the impact of these things that happen to our residents. And maybe a sort of a sidetrack, a sort of a parallel track is to think about what these acute events do to the people that work in town. And so have like another column on the spreadsheet, so to speak, or another way of thinking about it like that. And I kind of put that together while Carrie was talking. So that's how I'll think. That's maybe how we can think about it.
Right, Jeff, one of the things that we have talked about before and that Carrie and I did talk about in particular is the transportation issue. And to the degree that many of the people who work in town use public transportation, they're a category of people in town who need to be remembered in the event of these acute circumstances, in the same way that transportation to some of the other vulnerable community members, the elderly and those who don't have access to other transportation do. So I think there are probably multiple prongs to this that need to be fleshed out, but the transportation issue is one that I think is maybe the most obvious one, at least to me.
I agree. Mm-hmm. Anything else to add to that, Camila? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it for me.
Well,
So
I have one other one. I'm sorry, but it's always
Yeah.
me, right? 3.1.8. Goal number 3. Let me scroll to that. 1 second. Oh, hire a coastal engineer. One of the things that I noted was that there are multiple references to conducting studies and acknowledging our funding issues and looking for grants and so on. And while I'm hopeful that many of these programs and initiatives will be funded by the city, I think one of the hard discussions that the committee needs to have is the reluctance of some on our current council to fund contingency studies and feasibility studies. And we can't do some of these actions without having these initial studies to precede them. So for me, that is an important takeaway from this document, is that we've got, and at one point, I think it was Jeff in the last meeting said something about, we have a cell job on one of the issues. I think we have a cell job in general, because there are very few of these actions that are without cost. And yes, they could be in our capital improvement plans, but they will be at the cost of something else. So I feel like funding is a huge issue. And I know that we have in California just received the great news of $15 billion worth of climate related funding. Part of what I would hope we can get some creative thinking about is, do we have any access to that in order to fund some of what we want to do? Aside from just the regional cooperative funding that we might have, because it seems to me that those are two different things.
So I would suggest, Lynette, a couple of things. Hold on a second. I would suggest a couple of things. I think at the end of this project, we will certainly have a list of projects and probably some idea of how much all these projects are going to cost and whatnot. So there is a goal. There's a list that's going to come out at the end of, when the report's finished, sometime next summer. That is obviously after,
our budget cycle,
budget season, which sort of starts in the new year and ramps up. Mm-hmm. My suggestion, obviously Carrie and I are a little bit conflicted on this. My suggestion would be that at one of these meetings, at one of the climate committee meetings, perhaps we could, the 4 members that are not on the council, maybe could have a discussion about what you think the sort of monetary priorities are and send that to sort of the council as coming from sort of the non-council members of this commission. So I think that there's a little opportunity. I would hope that there's a little opportunity coming up at the mid-year budget review, which happens, sort of in January.
Right.
And then there's a bigger opportunity, which comes up in the formation of the capital improvement project budget in April. And then, of course, every year there's another capital improvement project budget. So in order to get into next year's capital improvement project budget, I think the thing to do would be for the 4 of you to sort of take an advance, get an advance copy of what the report's going to say and pick off some of the things that you think might be important to the committee. And that way, Carrie and I can sort of remain neutral on this issue, and the 4 of you can sort of decide what you think is important. So maybe that's something, Evan, I know you're keeping notes about what we should have on future agenda items. So maybe that's something we could sort of start talking about next month or the month after that with a view towards February, and then a couple of months after that with a view towards March and April. How does that sound, Lynette?
I think that sounds great. The other thing that I would like to see us do, and I think we can do this as a committee of the whole, and that is proclaim ourselves as being really interested in finding outside funding. Knowing that it takes resources to do those applications, knowing that it takes internal resources to manage projects once we might get the funding, but I do feel that one of the things we could do a better job at is looking outside ourselves for funding. And I'm very hopeful, because I know the magnitude of some of these projects is going to be pretty shocking, and especially when they're viewed in the aggregate. I feel like we have to identify potential funding sources. And I don't know if that's something that Rincon can help us with or that we do internally, but I really believe that that's important for us to undertake.
Yeah, and I'll just weigh in a little bit here, if that's okay. You mentioned the state budget, and Rincon, we're tracking that very closely, and I think it's 3.7 billion for just resilience funding, which is just huge. And so we're really anticipating most of that is going to go through OPR and the Strategic Growth Council as grants. So I mean, we're going to be watching that. One thing that we're anticipating is that the grant funding is probably not going to be coming out for a couple years, it just seems like OPR is going to need to hire, it's just going to maybe take a little while to get off the ground. But yeah, I think it's a great, having this plan is going to be a good thing to include on a grant application and, have all these projects already lined up.
Yes, and we won't be ready to do everything in the next, cycle anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Camila, for all the work that you guys are doing to help us and to help Anyas. Really appreciate your stepping in here, and we'll see you, I guess, next month.
That's right. Thanks so much, and thanks for all the questions and the discussion. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all.
Thank you.
So I guess we'll move on to the next thing on the agenda, which is to receive a presentation, an update on our greenhouse gas forecasting, and review the first draft list of greenhouse gas reduction members. And I see we have Mr. Hendricks here. Hello, Mr. Hendricks.
Yeah.
Hello, Michael.
Good afternoon. How are you doing? So I do have a presentation, and you should have gotten a list of candidate reduction measures that we can go over. I'll be going over those generally in the PowerPoint, but having that list in front of you will really help here later on in the presentation. So I'm going to share my screen if I'm allowed to, and bring that presentation up. Okay. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, great. So I'll go through the first few rather quickly. I'm Michael Hendricks. I'm the project manager at LSA for the technical information as far as GHG inventories, resolving issues with the inventories, developing forecasts, and assisting you in coming up with reduction measures and reduction targets to achieve that. What I am not going to do is be a placeholder and write a plan for you. I know the protocols and I know GHG inventories very well, but what I don't know is the locality and the specifics of the locality. And in learning about Carmel, there are very specific issues that make Carmel unique, and I'll be relying on all of you to really customize these reduction measures to make them pertinent and implementable within the city of Carmel. So we're a team here in a way. I'm the technical consultant, but really rely on you for how this would work in your local community. So there's a couple of parts, and I'll take questions at the end of each one. The first part is the inventories that you've received so far. And then I have three main issues I wanted to bring up about the inventories and potential solutions. And then once we're done with that, talk a little bit about forecasting and target setting. And then the third part, which would be the bulk of the presentation, is that list of candidate measures. And I go by the 9 goals in the PowerPoint, but it gets into more specifics within that list you have. So this is the 2019 inventory, and I'm going to move to the next slide. It has a pie chart of that. The city of Carmel, AMBAG has set up these inventories and has done a 2018, a 2015, I believe a 2010, and a 2005 set of inventories. So you got good record or historical data there as far as a set of trends. What concerns me, though, is there's some unusual things about it. Transportation seems a little low. A typical city, not that Carmel's typical, but a typical city would have transportation as the dominant sector, usually in the range of 40 to 60% of total emissions. And yours is currently showing at almost 26%. And then energy in this case is dominant. If you combine residential and commercial industrial energy, it is the biggest chunk, almost 60%. Solid waste is a teeny bit high for a city of your size. And then wastewater is probably right in the range where you should be. When we look at energy in particular, you'll notice that natural gas is nearly all of it. There's roughly 1% of electricity use. And there's some reasons for that I'll get into later. So here's the issues we see. One, with the electricity emission factor, it doesn't show all the emissions from all generation, either from PG&E previously or 3CE. Currently, it shows an annual allotment of what it planned to provide. And so if you understand electrical generation, on any given day, even any given hour, there are times when electrical consumption would exceed a particular generation. They'll fire up some natural gas peaker units. Those are not showing up in the annual generation rates. Now, AMBAC's solution to that, and actually the utility's solution to that, is to go to a more disaggregated emission factor that would show some of those generating emissions. So they were warning me to expect higher emission rates in 2020 through about 2023 to 2025. As they ramp up renewables, it should shave that off and start going down. But what the reality of that is, you're going to see in the coming years a more realistic emission factor, and those greenhouse gas emissions going up because of that emission factor being realistic. And that solution that I have proposed here is actually what they're going to do. On the issue of solid waste, CalRecycle is currently showing the plastics that were being recycled as part of the waste stream. The reason for that is that I think it was 2018 and 2019, China started refusing plastic recyclables to us. And we were cheating in a way statewide, because China was accepting all of our plastic recyclables. So rather than ramping up our own recyclable capability of plastics and other recyclables, we were literally exporting them off to China. That can't happen anymore. And as a result, the near-term consequence of that is that it is going back into our waste stream and winding up in landfills. The state is dealing with that through ramping up recycling facilities within California. That'll take a while. Locally, you can actually do some actions, and we'll get into that when we get to the reduction measures, by focusing on reuse containers rather than recyclable containers, particularly glass and plastic. So the biggest issue is transportation. And there was a couple of things that I noticed in the transportation sector. One was between, I believe it was 2010 and 2015, there was a drastic reduction in the amount of transportation-related emissions. It was also a drastic reduction in the amount of VMT. And I was told by AMBAG that was because of a change in how they did the modeling to comply with some Caltrans criteria. Can't really deal with their modeling changes. But the other issue that we found out about AMBAG's transportation modeling is that they calculate VMT on a boundary method, if you will. That is, they count all of the miles traveled within the city of Carmel, which is a fairly small area, rather than an origin destination. If you understand traffic well enough. Origin destination would look at the full VMT from the origin of that trip to where that trip terminated. So somebody working or living outside of Carmel but working in Carmel, it would follow their commute trip all the way into Carmel. And the way we deal with that through the protocols is when you have a trip in just one of those ends, either an origin or a destination within a jurisdiction and the other is outside, we look at the full VMT, but then count half of it to the jurisdiction that is the origin of the trip and count the other half of it to the jurisdiction where the destination is. And that seems to be the fairest way of allocating that full VMT. And then for pass-through trips, those are trips like on Highway 1 where someone is driving through but not actually stopping or having started their trip in Carmel. We don't count those at all because the city of Carmel as a jurisdiction does not have control of that trip. You have some indirect ways of controlling that trip by influencing the land use where that origin or destination of that trip is. But if they're just passing through, there's no real way to modify that. And for those reasons, we really want to focus climate action planning on those emission sources that you have jurisdictional control over. And that's why we discount pass-through trips. So there's been a variety of solutions done by different cities within the AMBAG area. Some of them are developing their own origin destination modeling. That's very expensive, on the realm of several $100,000. Some are using what they call big data, cell phone data, and other data sources that can really track vehicle use within a city and within a region. That is also pretty expensive. What we're proposing is that we investigate and try and allocate out what our pass-through trips, what percentage of that VMT AMBAG estimated are pass-through trips, and which ones have a trip end within the city. And once we have that, try and allocate those that have a trip in within the city, which ones are commuter versus visitor trips, and get an idea of the full length of that trip through commuter surveys and then the Visitors Bureau and other ways of figuring out the origin and destination of people that travel to Carmel to visit. So with that, I'm going to give you just a moment to digest all of that, and I'm sure you're going to have questions and discussion.
Thank you, Michael, for all that. We had, in fact, the committee had a discussion a few months ago about the origin destination model nature of VMTs. And I think we're pretty united that we do not want to use the AMBAG methodology. So thank you for proposing these solutions. My comments on the solutions would be these. First, eliminate pass-through trips for the city. We don't have any pass-through trips for all intents and purposes. We do not, no part of Highway 1 goes through the city. I would be, there may be the occasional measured in single digits or even dozens of trips a day that people come through the Pebble Beach gate and exit through Rio Road because it's just shorter, and there could be more than a few dozen. But for all intents and purposes, nobody uses Carmel as a pass-through. They would all use Highway 1. So that's, there may be some small number, but you won't have to do any investigation there. Just pick a number and it'll just be what it is. And I'm sure that will be fine. Probably take you half an hour. The commuter trips is a much more difficult problem. And I think from my perspective, you've said this correctly. We have visitors and we have workers, people that work in the city and people that come to visit. And I think that's a more difficult a more difficult proposition for you, but I think that's where all of our VMTs are. In addition to the fact that I go to the grocery store and stuff like that. But I think that that will be a difficult process for you. But I'm looking forward to you figuring that out. Could you go back a slide?
Sure.
Or back 2 slides? Oh, that slide's fine. No, I don't understand, when you were talking about the electricity generation. So most of the people in Carmel, as you probably know, and as AMBAG surely knows, we get our electricity through 3CE. And 3CE claims that all of their electricity is green, so it doesn't result from greenhouse gas emissions. So I have 2 questions related to that. The first one is, do you not agree with that? You talked a little bit about how that may not be accurate, and I don't understand why that's the case. So maybe you could.
Sure. So on an annual basis, they are providing you with an allocated amount of kilowatts that satisfy your consumption of electricity. The issue comes up in the hour-to-hour, day-to-day. So there will be times, most particularly during the evening peak, right after sundown, when you don't have a lot of renewables available and you have a lot of consumption, that peaker units are often used, or they may purchase electricity from PG&E or other sources that are not necessarily clean, but you need it at that moment to keep the lights on, if you will. They compensate by that by buying renewables in such a manner that they have satisfied the allocation that they promised you. So they've, in some cases, bought renewable credits. But if you look at it hour to hour or day to day, you will see some generation periods in there where they had to buy power just to keep the power on. And so the solution that 3CE is coming up with is, rather than having that annual show of what they promised you and it shows really low, actually showing the I think they're going to do on a monthly basis, allocate their emission factor. So it will include those brief times when they are using when they're purchasing electricity from some other entity, and that happens to be natural gas or some other emission inducing generation.
Thank you very much. Do you have a link that you could send to us that we could sort of read offline about this sort of reporting quandary, and maybe we could understand it a little bit more?
Yes, in fact, AMBAG kind of addresses it in their 2019 draft emissions inventory report they sent you. In the appendices, it talks a little bit about their emission factor. So that's the first place to go, and I'll give you some more.
Thank you.
Time. Sure. So that, I'll just bring it up right now. We'll bring it up more in the reduction measures. That gets to the issue of time of use electricity and also battery storage. So the state as a whole is trying to increase the amount of energy storage so that these evening peaks, we're not reliant so much on natural gas or peaker units and other ways of keeping the lights on, that we're able to, when renewables are at an ebb, we're able to draw from the storage of electricity that we had when we had peak generation of renewables. So that is a more long-term solution. And we should see that. So by 2030, even 3CE, the emissions that they're showing you now that are extremely low would actually be reality.
Thank you. Carrie?
Yeah, I kind of go back, Michael. I want to kind of address the visitor usage slide. Where's that? Oh, the transportation on the visitor. So
yes.
I don't know how familiar you are with Carmel-by-the-Sea, but we have about 3,600 people that live here. but yet we have a huge tourist-based economy with a lot of people visiting. So for example, we have about 1,000 hotel rooms, and we can provide occupancy rates for going back. So our guests come here, they stay at a hotel, and they basically park their car and they walk everywhere. So is there any way to incorporate, and then we have what we call the short-term visitor who comes during the day, goes to the beach, eats at a restaurant, and then moves on. So is there any way that you can get better figures knowing that there's a certain percentage of our visitors that come and stay overnight and don't really use their car much versus that one that stops, spends a short amount of time, and then moves on? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So Agnes had pointed me to the visitor center and the tourism bureau to help me get an understanding of where visitors are coming from. Mm-hmm. My sense right now is that the majority of visitors that are staying in your hotel, while they're maybe walking around while they're in Carmel, that trip to get from their home to the hotel often involves a really long trip.
Well, it's big percentage of it is what we call the Bay Area, LA, and the Valley. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Some of it is obviously coming from the Monterey Airport. Mm. Some may fly in and then either have a rental car or get shuttled to the hotel in Carmel. Right. But talking to Agnes, most of it is people driving to Carmel from the Bay Area or Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty substantial commute for them. I want to get a sense of that. The other one, which is going to be even harder, and maybe I can elicit the help of Lynette since she's working with the Chamber of Commerce to get a sense of who the workers are and where they're coming from. I need to know where they're coming from and how they're commuting here in order to really get a sense of the commute trip. So those are two big challenges. If we can...
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
So while you're talking about that specific thing, how the people that get here, I think, and I'm going to look at Carrie, I think there are only two ways that people get into town to work. Either they drive or they take the bus. Mm-hmm. And I think that it should be relatively easy. I'm the MST person, so it should be relatively easy for me to get bus information. It may take a little bit of massaging, but I'm pretty sure we can get that. So I'll take that.
Oh, great. And if I understood it right, Lynette was working with the Chamber of Commerce to try and get a sense of where all the workers are and get a survey more to do with your adaptation issues and resiliency. But I see some advantage to helping us understand the commute of workers for this part as well through the exact same information. For those that drive, I'd like to know just generally where the origin of their trip came from. I don't need to know their address, but if they're coming from Seaside or where they're coming from so that we can estimate that VMT, those miles traveled. Yeah. And then we'll have a much better reference from that. And my sense is that once we have those figures, your on-road transportation emissions are going to be a greater proportion of your GHG inventory. In fact, I strongly suspect that your GHG inventory will be a lot bigger than it was with what AMBAG is showing with the boundary method.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more questions from committee members or public before Michael moves on about the things that we've talked about so far? Okay, Michael, are you getting ready to say something, Michael?
I'm about to move to the next slide, so I'm just pausing for a little bit longer before I do, in case there's any last minute. All right. So now I'm moving on to forecasting and target setting. And I'll explain this graph right here. That red line at the very top is what we call business as usual emissions. This is taking from the inventory and then forecasting out into the future using present day regulatory compliance and that kind of thing, levels of emissions, how the emission inventory will progress through time. Not doing any kind of climate action planning, and the state not doing anything extra other than what is currently being done. And you'll notice that that has a sharp downward trend between 2015 and 2019 because of the AMBAG figures that I'm hoping to resolve here when we adjust those inventories. But then even from 2019 all the way to 2045, that red line is on a very slight downward trend. And that is because the population of Carmel is declining at about 0.11% per year. Economic activity at present is not enough to pick it up. So when we look into the future right now, that's the downward trend. That worries me a little, just as, and I'll let you guys struggle with that because I don't know how to solve that, but a vital community, while you don't want it to be growing gangbusters, you like to see positive growth. My sense is that people born into Carmel, there may not be a lot of births in Carmel, but those that are born into Carmel tend to leave Carmel.
Michael, can I ask a question about that in
Sure.
terms of whether, in your opinion, it might be that our housing turnover is actually showing that more people are second homeowners, and so that they don't live here.
Yeah.
And there are fewer homeowners who live here. That is what is causing that decline in population. I don't know if you've got information about that or if we have information about that, but it seems as a resident to me that that could be one of the factors.
That is definitely a factor. So what I want to do is work with the city and the Chamber of Commerce to get a better sense of the economic activities. If most of these homes are second homes, if you will,
Yeah,
that's
and
all
Michael,
those visitors.
Let me interrupt you thank you for a second. Lynette brings up a really valid point. You know, we've been talking, you know, in the previous slide, we were talking about hotel visitors and tracking their trips into town. We clearly need to track the trips into town of second homeowners and monthly rentals, and we have a few nightly rentals in the downtown. We have like 40. So I think I would ask you to sort of put placeholders on your spreadsheets. I don't know exactly how we'll do that. But we have probably 2,000 vacation homes in town. So we will need to figure out how to track the VMTs associated with those sort of hybrid resident visitors as well.
Yes, and that makes sense that those would be counted in the visitors portion rather than residents. It gets a little blurred because they're a homeowner there. I don't know that they get counted in the population or not. I need to talk to AMBAG about that. Right now, moving down again, that green shaded area is what we're expecting as far as things in the latest scoping plan that the state put out for reducing greenhouse gas emissions statewide. And you'll notice a fairly regular downward trend till you get to 2030, and then it levels off slightly. It still goes down, but it levels off just a little bit, doesn't go down as much as it had been. That is because the scoping plan right now is focused on 2030, and those statewide reductions will continue to include reductions, but not at the level that they did as you first implemented them. And then that red shaded area is what we have is a placeholder for those local reductions that would be needed to get to these proposed targets. Now, 2020 has already gone by. And by the way, these targets are set based off the 2015 inventory. I did not want to set them off the 2005 because it was so much bigger than the 2015 and 2018, 2019 inventories that your targets would be above the red line, except for 2045 when you needed to get to zero. And at that point, it would have a steep dive. And that's just because it's a percentage of your baseline inventory. So right now, I set as a placeholder 2015 is your baseline inventory because it was a little more amenable to the progressed 2018 and 2019 inventories than it was the earlier ones. And that had to do with the change in the transportation modeling that occurred. Obviously, this chart's going to change when we adjust that 2018, 2019 inventory and get things a little more correct as far as emissions. Everything should go up a little bit, and those targets would correspond with that, except for the final target in 2045. So I'll pause a little bit. Right now, you'll see a blue area called local reductions. Don't have a reduction plan yet. We just have candidate measures, so that hasn't been measured. But we do have a tool that will be calculating out expected emission reductions in later versions of this chart when you guys are choosing reduction measures. That blue line, I'm hopeful, will fill that red shaded area. Last thing I want to talk about is we should focus on the 2030 target. I don't want to try and get to the 2045 target right now. It would be near impossible for Carmel to get to zero net emissions without significant help from the state. So by complementing what the state does, really focusing on 2035, and we'll talk a little bit about how future like energy efficiency retrofits and things can set the existing built environment up for that carbon neutrality in the reduction measure section, but really focusing on 2030 right now. And then as we get closer to 2030, this forthcoming climate action plan can amend and continue on reductions as you implement them, and focus more on subsequent years post 2030. Yes. Oh, Jeff, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I have to fix it. Can you like at some point talk about that whole discussion about focusing on 2030 versus 2045 went by for me really fast. And I don't think it's maybe we need to not have that discussion now, but is that a decision that you make, or is that a decision that we as a committee make? And if it's sort of in cooperation with you, can we put it off for a month or two before we sort of finalize that so that we can understand it a little more?
Sure. So I am your technical consultant. I don't make decisions. The city and you guys make the decisions. I'm recommending that you focus on 2030 and for a couple of reasons. One is this is your first real climate action plan. Although you've been doing a lot of things that'll get you there, I think actually implementing, tracking, and monitoring the plan with a focus on 2030 will help you in understanding your next steps to get towards 2045. And that's why I'm recommending we focus on 2030 right now.
My follow-up question to that statement is this: do you think that if we don't focus on 2045, that when we get to 2030, it will be impossible to get to the 2045 targets? Like, is the time, are there long-term things that take 25 years to do that if we don't start now, we won't be able to start in 2030, and it will cause us to miss our 2045 target. That's basically my concern.
All right, and when we get to the reduction measure portion, you'll see I'll be discussing things that set us up for 2030 to 2045, like electrification, where you're getting rid of natural gas out of the existing built environment, really helps you towards getting to that 2045. What I found is when communities only focus on the carbon neutrality, they get some very aggressive reduction measures that may not be particularly feasible. So focusing on 2030, monitoring and assessing progress, and then amending the plan to have something that's reality checked and feasible is really important. But you're right, you don't want to ignore 2045. My word there is focus on 2030, not ignore 2045. All right. And when I get through the reduction measures, I'll talk about opportunities where things can really set you up for that carbon neutrality ultimate goal, even in the 2030 time frame. So now I'm going to go through each of the 9 goals, and in the slides I really summarize so that list of measures will really help you a lot. I'm not expecting to get all of the comments at today's committee meeting that you have on that list of measures, but rather we can talk through them, and then you can have comments and dialogue either through me or Anya's. I think will be taking your comments as we refine those measures. So before I get into any of the goals, a couple of nuances that I see for Carmel is it's primarily a built-out community. You're not having a lot of new businesses being built, new commercial or industrial projects coming online, or new residential coming online. A vast majority of your land uses would continue to be existing land uses. So I think while we don't want to ignore new building, because that's an opportunity to really make them efficient, we need to focus on the existing built environment. And I've divided it up between existing residential and existing commercial. And you'll see the two mirrored a bit, the same for new residential and new commercial. So for goal 1, increase energy efficiency of existing residential units. I see this as some low-hanging fruit. The challenge here is you need to incentivize and promote and gain homeowners willing to do the energy efficiency retrofits. So that energy efficiency education and maybe even recognition in the residential sector is really important towards having people understand why they need to retrofit their home and make them more energy efficient and electrify their home, those kinds of things, and give some recognition for those homeowners that do that. Another one is increased participation in existing energy efficiency retrofit programs. So 3CE is going to be providing and has provided some minor opportunities. There will be others. Home energy evaluations, where the utility, in this case 3CE, comes in and evaluates the home and makes recommendations on where you could improve your energy efficiency. And then particular to home energy renovations, promote participation in green building programs as far as energy increasing. So just getting to Title 24 would be huge, but there's some other programs for those second homes that can afford it. Getting them LEED certified would be great. Those kinds of things. Promote incentives to homeowners to convert to electrification. Getting off of natural gas is a great way to immediately reduce emissions significantly within the home. now, and it really sets you up for that 2045 goal. And then streamlining certain permit applications that focus on energy efficiency retrofits. So I'm going to pause a minute before I go through each of the goals, in case you have any questions or dialogue. Before I move on, maybe I can ask you guys one. How many of you are homeowners in Carmel? So this affects you directly.
Yeah. Everybody on the committee is a homeowner in Carmel. That's one reason why they're on the committee.
All right.
Yeah, there are very few. The renters are less involved in sort of the political sphere here. And I don't think at this point, a lot of the rentals have been converted to vacation homes for more well-off people, and the market is sort of dried up. One sort of comment I would make that I'm pretty sure Evan can answer. You know, you talked about the number of new homes versus sort of existing housing stock, and we have a tremendous amount of construction in town. I don't know what the percentage is. I would be certain that the percentage of the amount of construction in town per house is higher here than certainly in any other city in Monterey County. It's obscene how much construction there is. Evan, do you have any idea, like, how many gut renovations are we processing now every year?
If you give me maybe 3 minutes, I can probably pull up a number.
Okay, so those are not new homes, but major renovations of the homes?
A lot of them are new. A lot of them are scraped. It depends on how old the home is. So right across the street from me, for example, one home was scraped and one home was basically all but scraped. I mean, you would call it a renovation. They left up the framing and took everything else away.
Okay, those are some real opportunities. I'm wondering if we add into this goal 1 for major renovations, they have to meet Title 24, but maybe you want to make them electrification, no natural gas.
Yeah,
and
we'll certainly talk about that when we get.
Yeah, that is some opportunities. Those are almost new. And for those that scrape the lot, I think that's what you said, that is a new building. Leaving the foundation and the frame, while it's pretty major renovation, is still considered a renovation. But if they scrape the lot and build something new, that should be a new permit.
And Evan, isn't it true that even a certain amount of percentage of the home being remodeled is going to trigger code upgrades to current energy codes?
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Have to be a complete scrape.
For the planning department's purposes, if you demolish 50% or more of the exterior walls, that's considered a demolition. The building department may have a different requirement. If you demolish 50% or more of the linear walls, interior or exterior, that's what would trigger sprinkler requirements. But again, it's still not considered a new home at that point. That's my understanding.
But I do think even minor remodels at some certain point trigger code upgrades for Title 24 and some of the other current code upgrades from the state.
Yeah, I don't know what that percentage is. The magic number usually seems to be 50%. It's just 50% of what?
Right.
But certainly if you replace new windows, those would have to meet the energy code. If you do new lighting, so just taking off the fixtures, getting an electrical permit, that would have to come up to current code. And I'm still looking for that number. I apologize.
So yeah, if Title 24 is applied to these older homes that are getting significant renovations like that. That's going to help a lot.
I think an issue with that, though, is just encouraging the work to be done. I don't know if it's the cost that's prohibitive or the process that's prohibitive, or just people aren't interested in making those changes. But you know, there certainly are a lot of older homes in town that do have this opportunity to, you know, be retrofitted. It's just getting people excited to do it one way or another.
Yes, and that is really the education and dialogue that you have with your residents to get them excited about that. And different things motivate different people, but a lot of times, like these, as you put it, scrape out renovations, they're motivated by wanting to completely redo the interior, not necessarily energy efficiency, but educating those people about the opportunity they have to really upgrade the home as far as energy efficiency. I think is it would be wasted to do that kind of renovation and not have it energy efficient, not have some PV panels included, those kinds of things. So I'm going to move on to
Yes, please. I think, you know, what we're seeing is a lot of interest in this, and this is the first look at it, and there will be more opportunities to comment, but if you could go to the next goal, that'd be great.
Sure. So this one I'm going to go through really quickly. It's the same thing for new residential, educating folks, promoting tier 1 and tier 2 building standards, streamlining the permit process for those that voluntarily go to tier 1 and 2, possibly require electrification for new residential units. What I'm not proposing here is mandating tier 1 and tier 2. And the reason is you can have reach codes that go beyond Title 24, but it requires approval from the CEC. And my own experience with that is that by the time you get the reach code approved with the CEC, it's about a 3-year process. Title 24 has moved on to its next energy efficiency level, and you wind up perpetually applying for reach codes. So rather than go through that aggravating process, focusing your energy and attention on convincing the folks in Carmel to voluntarily do that. All right, and the next one's going to be existing businesses or commercial. And it kind of mirrors what we had with residential, but with commercial buildings, having energy efficiency education, increasing business participation in energy efficiency programs, and business energy evaluations that the utilities can do, and then promoting commercial energy renovations, green building programs, the same things we talked about on the residential level, but for existing businesses. What I don't have here is electrification of businesses. You could have that in existing for major renovations, but you'd have to have caveats in it. So certain types of restaurants and certain other businesses really do require natural gas to really do what they do. You'd need to have carve-outs, if you will, or exemptions from a electrification ordinance if you decided to do that for businesses. Any questions?
No, but you're absolutely right about the carve-out issue for commercial cooking lines and things. There just aren't, technology is not quite there to come up with electrical equivalent that's a reasonable cost or even effectiveness.
Yeah, there are some cooking surfaces that are electric that can do it, but the cost issue is there. So
You're convincing a chef that to not see the flame.
well, that's true. And you know what? That's true of homeowners as well. The
Yeah.
gas company's been very good at really promoting the natural gas use within homes. And here's
we're getting into a political question here that maybe we should best avoid.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'll ask the question of the committee before I move on. How many of you are business owners in the city of Carmel? Oh, good. We at least have one.
And Carrie.
I think that's important.
Carrie is too. She's just not.
Carrie and John.
Oh, great.
I have a hotel and John has a restaurant.
Yeah, and I can say that Michael LePage has a construction business as well. Mm-hmm. So it's more than he's also.
Right.
All right. So this affects you guys as well.
Yep, that's why I'm here.
My goal is to conflict Carrie out of all these important decisions.
All right.
That's right.
So goal 4 is for new commercial. I don't think you have a lot of new commercial, but you do have some business renovations, if you will, maybe expansions, that kind of thing. But from what Anya's told me, there's not a lot of new commercial construction going on in the city. But when there's some real opportunities, again, to convince them to go to LEED certification, which would go beyond Title 24 and streamline those applications and require electrification for new commercial development with some carve-outs for restaurants and other businesses that just have to have natural gas as part of their business structure. Goal 5 is energy efficiency through water conservation. This will also help reduce the wastewater flow. So my sense of Carmel right now, you guys are pretty water wise already, but and you may already exceed the state water efficiency standards. But there's still opportunities there, particularly when you're renovating a home or renovating a kitchen to get to more water efficient as well as energy efficient appliances, and then promoting zero-scape or low water use landscaping. And then we're talking a little bit about recycled water for certain types of commercial and multifamily landscaping. Being able to utilize gray water systems for residential, and promoting rainwater harvesting to help reduce the landscape irrigation needs.
Michael, forgive me for not knowing this. Everybody else on the call may fully understand this. I don't. You said that Carmel might already exceed the state water efficiency standard. What is that, and do we know, any of us know whether we do exceed that standard?
So the state set as a baseline for water use back in the last drought. We're in an even worse drought, but I'm not remembering the year. Was it 2008? They set as a baseline year, and wanting statewide a reduction of 30% compared to that baseline year water use. My sense with Carmel, and it comes from my mom living in what the post office determined was Carmel, but it was actually unincorporated Monterey County. They had allocated water units, and there was a lot of stress already in your area on water efficiency, not because of what the state was mandating, but just what the area had as far as potable water supplies. My sense also is that there's not a lot of turf and lawn other than the golf courses, but local businesses other than the golf courses already have some very water efficient landscaping. That's my understanding.
Yeah.
maybe yeah.
So this is Carrie. We, the Monterey Peninsula as a whole, have one of the lowest per water usages per day in the state. So you're correct there. Secondly, there are no golf courses in Carmel-by-the-Sea, so we don't have to worry about that. But part of our city uniqueness is that we do not, we focus on natural landscaping rather than lawns, and water efficiency in that way as well. So you're correct with your assumptions there.
Well, the governor has just issued a new reduction target. Right. I mean, are we factoring that in our thinking? Or is that a new state standard, first of all? And secondly, are we thinking about that within Carmel-by-the-Sea in specific?
So what the governor just issued is what you call an executive order, which applies to statewide agencies. So the State Water Resources Board and those in charge of water allocation throughout the state are going to comply with that. My sense is that the entire Monterey Peninsula will be kind of ignored with that, because you are already, as you've pointed out, well below the per capita water use of anybody else in the state. Where they're going to be focusing their attention is more like where I live in the high desert of Southern California. Southern California is, just generally speaking, have been water hogs historically. So there'll be a lot of angst and push in our area, but not so much in yours. That there's not a lot of opportunity to reduce your water consumption more, other than getting really efficient appliances, but that's just a small amount of your water use. Most of your water use goes towards irrigation of landscaping, and as you pointed out, your natural landscaping is already pretty water efficient. Where I do see some opportunities is taking advantage of gray water systems and promoting rainwater harvestings. So the stuff that's running off your roof, rather than just being runoff, being collected and used to irrigate the landscape.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Michael, we've talked about all those as a committee, and you're right, we're pretty spot on that. So
all right,
go ahead for goal 6.
Goal 6 is decreasing energy demand by reducing the heat island effect, and there's 2 parts to that. One is your urban forest tree canopy. Having that shading really helps. You already have a fairly substantial urban tree canopy, so maintaining the health of that urban forest canopy, I think, is where we'd focus. And then requiring light reflecting surfaces on rooftops, that's already a Title 24 standard. But whenever you're putting on new roofing, making sure that it is light reflecting or cool roofs, and then use cool pavement options when repaving roadways is another place to further reduce the heat island effect.
This is another question, maybe for Carrie and Jeff more so than Michael. Do we require light reflecting surfaces on rooftops?
No, that would require, Evan could answer that, but I don't believe so. Right, Evan?
No, it's actually a bit of a tricky situation, because the light reflecting surfaces are often ones that are inconsistent with our design guidelines currently.
Yeah.
So we do try to strike as much of a balance as we can, but there currently is a bit of an internal conflict right now.
So there is.
And how long do we have to comply with Title 24? if
Well, so any material would comply with Title 24. It's just I guess the materials that are better at reflecting light might not necessarily be the best option if you're applying the design guidelines. So, for example, a metal roof, which we've been seeing a lot of, the lighter colored roofs do a better job at reflecting the light and keeping, the heat out. And those are generally preferred by homeowners and roofing companies. But what we want is a darker roof with a matte finish, which does a better job of absorbing the heat. So again, there are products that meet the Title 24 requirements, meet the building code requirements, but it's just not necessarily the preferred material from, I guess, a energy efficiency standpoint.
You have a lot of homes that are overlooking other homes here, overlooking their roofs when it could be a significant issue.
So there are products out there that work, but there certainly are products out there that are better.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask I'll try not to take up too much time. Why do in an environment that's generally cold versus an environment that's generally warm, how concerned about this should we be? I mean, we're not LA. We know we're 10 or 15 degrees colder than LA. Just to use your own example, Michael, what like how big of a deal is this really that I have a black asphalt roof on my house? Frankly, I heat my house more than I air condition my house. And most of the time, I think the black asphalt does me a favor as opposed to like I don't have to air condition that heat out of my house.
So you are in an unusual situation where you're close enough to the ocean that you don't ever have what I'd call extreme heat days, although we're expecting more of those due to climate change. So there may be a time in the future when you want to air condition your home, but not right now. That cool roof concept is probably not as big an issue in Carmel as it is elsewhere. Larger cities, and in particular those that have a lot of asphalt parking lots and roadways and that kind of thing, really create a heat island effect that Carmel, because of its tree canopy for one, and its proximity to the ocean for another, doesn't have that issue as prevalent. So we can certainly strike out certain actions within Goal 6 if you don't see them as beneficial. What I would recommend is rather than calling it require light reflecting surfaces on rooftops, you're going to have to do Title 24, but have Title 24 compliant roofs help insulate enough that should not be an issue.
Okay, we should probably move on.
All right. Goal 7, and I expect we'll have some conversations here. Goal 7 is to decrease VMT. And there's a couple of things that we're talking about. One is develop a bicycle master plan. Now, Carmel's kind of unique in the sense that it has some very narrow streets, so I don't know that striping off bike lanes would be a great thing. But there's some nuanced models. There are a lot of cities in Europe that are very bicycle centric, that the bicycles and the cars share the road, if you will. And having that kind of concept and having drivers aware that bicycles are on the street is a way of developing a bicycle friendly environment that is still safe. Our problem in the United States generally, not necessarily Carmel, but generally in the United States, is that our drivers are not conscious of pedestrians or bicyclists. And we have
that's true here too.
we have a higher fatality rate of pedestrians and bicyclists than we do other places. So really making that awareness, developing a bicycle master plan, and maybe having some signage that bicycles are going to be sharing the road here, keeping the speed limits down, and making drivers really aware is one way of doing that. Another, and I'm going to skip down several bullet points to bring it up, is neighborhood electric vehicles. Where there are vehicles on these narrow streets, having neighborhood electric vehicles helps in that they're smaller, they're more maneuverable, they're also electric, but they're not near the cost of a highway standard electric vehicle.
Yeah, we actually have a few of those already, but
yeah,
promoting them would be nice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to Carrie's point, not only do we have a few of these, what I think you were talking about, neighborhood electric vehicles, I also happen to know people that have electric bikes that they use as, you know, in the same vein, mostly to get around town, get around the peninsula. So we are starting to see that as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the visitor marketing agency for Carmel and is talking to the airport. So that your last bullet is a point well taken. I think that's something that could be something of the future.
Yes, and if indeed that comes to reality, let's make it an electric shuttle. Just pointing that out. Commercial bus systems have to be electric by 2025 by state ordinance anyway, so there's a state regulation for that. So any kind of shuttles we'd have, it just makes sense to make them electric. And then something you're already doing a lot of is electric vehicle infrastructure, having electric vehicle chargers in commercial parking areas, and promoting electric vehicle chargers within the single family homes and the parking areas of multifamily residential as well, and the hotels.
Yeah, and the hotels. Mm-hmm.
All right. Goal 8 is reducing solid waste. So we talked about that plastic dilemma, promoting zero waste events. Anya said you've had a couple, and certainly promoting those. Promote home composting and promote reuse containers. So we're already doing this with shopping. We now carry our own shopping bags rather than get those disposable plastic bags. But taking that one step further, so in my household, we go to stores that have bin, like rice, oats, that kind of thing. And we're able to bring our own container to put that in. I have a local farmer's market that I can bring my own jar to refill with honey, that kind of thing. So really promoting where you can use reuse containers rather than recyclables will help with that. And then educating the community on the use of the city provided containers. I don't think the picture I have there is Carmel specific, but
definitely not.
No.
There's quite a big history here. No.
Yeah, but having people understand the different color coding and what each container should have in it and what it can't have in it. One of the problems with recycling is when you mix things together, like if you mix food waste with the paper recycling, it's a mess. It all winds up being disposed rather than some of it composted and some of it recycled.
Yes, we're working on that education because of SB 1383 that's coming in January. So we're aware of that. Mm-hmm.
All right. And then increase clean energy use. So you talked about the problem with not having enough sun for solar panels. I think there's still an opportunity for solar panels. You're just not going to get the generation you would like in my neck of the woods, where 99% of the time it's really sunny. but you will get some benefits from that. And then, of course, 3CE, going to a 100% renewable program, really encouraging residents and businesses to do that would help as well.
Michael, can you go back to your previous slide for a second? I've got a
Sure.
question on that. In this kind of category, Jeff and Evan were talking about how many new houses are getting scraped around here, or old houses are getting scraped for new houses. And when we built this house, we disassembled the house that was here, and rather than we didn't tear it down, we took it apart board by board, donated. The material was donated, actually it was taken to a group in Berkeley who then donated it, or sold it and took the proceeds and donated it to Habitat for Humanity. But what that does is it eliminates almost all the construction waste in the landfill. So I think one thing the city could look at would be requiring these houses, when they're being torn down, to look into some kind of program of recycling the buildings that are being torn down, just rather than just eating them and throwing the waste in the landfill. So would that be part of this category that you?
Yes, and that's an excellent proposal for this. So yeah, we can add that. I will. I'll add recycling construction material.
Yeah, I just saw a neighbor across the street just tore their house down. It was all clear heart redwood, and it was just mashed up, and it was a real shame.
I previously worked for another jurisdiction, and one of the programs they had, I don't know if it was under a green building program, but it was something they offered, was instead of demolishing the house, you were able to deconstruct it. It was called I can't remember the exact name, but and the idea was you literally take the house apart piece by piece.
Right.
And there was a certain benefit to it on the building permit side. I can't remember again exactly what it was, but you got your demolition permit ahead of time. You were able to start work much sooner than you would otherwise.
So a real incentive for it.
Mm-hmm.
You need a real incentive for that, because that is very labor intensive.
The other thing you can do is you get a tax write-off for the donation of the material, which often more than exceeds the additional cost to have it deconstructed.
Wow. Yeah, particularly if there's a lot of redwood there. That is a valuable commodity now.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Can I just go back to two thoughts on the VMTs? We have a number of large bus visitors who come in. They're coming from somewhere on these big transport vehicles. What are they called? Big passenger buses. And we get a number of those that come in every day filled with tourists. So that is a kind of unique vehicle mile travel that we get. It dumps a lot of people into town, but it's still a big giant vehicle that is traveling. And related to the amount of construction that goes on in town, every home that's being either remodeled or constructed from a scraped lot has 8, 9, 6, whatever number of construction vehicles at its site every day during that process. So we have a lot of construction vehicles in town that are not necessarily thought of, I think, or captured any other way. Maybe there's some way of quantifying that I don't know about.
That's a good point, Lynette. Let's let Michael kind of reverberate on that at a later time, because we have one more presentation that we definitely want to have time for. So can I kind of get us moving along, just because we're going to be talking about this again. This is kind of the first stab, right, Michael?
Yes, and I think there's a workshop in November Agnes wanted me to be at. So by then, I think you'll have a lot of really thought out comments on the list. You do have the list. So I encourage you to take notes on that list and give Anya's feedback if, as well as to me. As far as tour buses, I'll have to think about that, how you could somehow regulate a certain standard for that. But I'll think about that.
Thank you.
So
right.
We were on the last goal, which is increase clean energy use. Any comments on that one? I think this is my last slide. Yes, it is.
So what's the next step here, Michael? You're gonna, obviously there was your presentation was really good and gave us a lot of food for thought. So what's the next step for us?
For you, I really want you to focus on that list of reduction measures on your side, and then where you can help me out, particular Lynette maybe help me out with the Chamber of Commerce and figuring out the workforce so I can help figure out the commute. Mm-hmm. And there was somebody else that volunteered to help me, I think, on the
bus ridership. That was Jeff.
Yes, Jeff. I was gonna help you. I was gonna help you with the bus, and I can probably also help you with some of the thoughts around, the work that you do with second homeowners.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great.
And sort of doing those I can probably lead you to the right places for second homeowners and vacation rentals and VRBOs, and which are basically hotel rooms. So we can try to I can help you down that road.
And Michael, it's really Carrie who's the lead person with the chamber. I am her second.
Oh, okay. I remember you mentioning it, so I latched on to your name.
Thank you. Just so you know who's got the clout and who doesn't.
I don't know about that, but yeah, we can talk about that. All right. Well, thank you, Michael. That was really eye-opening, and obviously we have a lot to say about it. So we will get another chance, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I would ask the committee members to spend the next few weeks. Last month, we reviewed the draft adaptation strategies document, and we sent our comments to Agnes over the following 2 or 3 weeks. And I think this is probably a good opportunity to do the same thing here. And I know it's a little hard because we don't know which of these levers are big levers and which of these levers are little levers. But I'm sure that Michael would like to hear what our different thoughts are about the levers themselves and what we think will work and won't work and all that. So the more comments, the better.
All right. The biggest challenges I see are reducing VMT. Even when we get an accurate count of what that VMT is, it's just hard to get people out of their cars. The other is because we're really focused on the existing built environment, is getting homeowners and business owners to do energy efficiency retrofits. And I do see opportunities there when there's going to be major renovations of a home or a business to really get with those business owners and the homeowners and educate them on the opportunities they have. And in some cases, require them to go to electrification. Certainly Title 24 is going to require them to do some things, but encouraging them to go to Tier 2 or Tier 3 would be helpful. So those are the big ticket items I see. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you very much. It's really great to see some real progress on this part of our project. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
And until we move on, let me find my, move on to the next item on our agenda. I know Is it Kirsten and Emily, Ms. Lisk and Ms. Gottlieb? Is that right? I thank you for being patient with us. I know where it's 18 minutes to 6, but you can have at least 30 extra seconds past 6 o'clock. So let's not go to 7, but let's not go to 6:30 maybe, but don't feel obligated to end exactly at 6 o'clock.
Well, we've been madly editing our slides, but we couldn't have gotten a better queue up. So yeah, pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. It's been actually great to really see everything, all the great thought and leadership that Carmel's taking by doing a climate action plan. And I can tell each of you is very committed to community well-being and has also done a lot on your own. I can tell by some of the comments that you are far ahead of your neighbors in terms of what you're doing to reduce your environmental footprint. And you're involved here, really making some great thoughtful comments. So sorry if I got a little crazy in the comments, but I want to see where you are thinking about heading is exactly right. And there's a lot of resources that can help you. So feel free to reach out if any of those are helpful. I didn't intend them to be public record, but more resources for your team. And I did also give Evan a few direct ones. So my name's Kirsten Liskey. I'd like to thank you for having us and Ashley Paulsworth for making us the connection at the county. I'd like to introduce Emily Gottlieb. She's a co-presenter. She's a Monterey resident and environmental educator from our campaign development team. As a note, we will share our slide deck that we're about to start sharing, and it has notes and talk points and links. So you can just sit back and take it in. If you would like it, Emily's running our deck. Thank you so much. Either that or Evan is. Next slide. So we're here to talk about a Central Coast Community Action Campaign. That's not a branded campaign title because it's still in conceptual development. But what we're here to talk to you about is a campaign we've been working on with a large group and introducing the campaign around the region. And so next slide, it should be today's journey. Yeah, perfect. So we're now, after we've developed it and presented it, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback and we're ready to launch the campaign. We'd love to have Monterey County participate, and Carmel's participation and financial support could make that possible. I'm here today to offer an abbreviated version of the presentation that we've been doing in the past. And the problems we're trying to solve are the ones you outlined today, but we'll share what the impact and outcomes our campaign looks for, the approach, and we'd love to get your feedback and talk about involvement. Next slide. So, you know, at last we have federal leadership to meet the pace of change that science demands, but as you can see, especially for Carmel, 40% nationally of US emissions come from 5 household activities we do every day. It looks like Carmel's footprint is more like 60% from the residential sector. So the community members really have to get engaged if we're going to meet our drawdown goals. It's also a positive feedback loop. If you get folks taking action to reduce emissions and prepare for disasters, it generates a lot of political will for the additional deeper systems change and policy support that is going to be needed to pass some of the things that you were talking about today. Next slide. Seeing an emerging need to provide clear guidance to citizens and spark them to action, Ecology Action began partnering with City of Santa Cruz in 2018 to explore ideas. We tested and enrolled participation from around the Central Coast, from Community Environmental Council and the county in Santa Barbara all the way up through here. And we've been working for the past year to develop out our campaign. And with that, I'll hand it off to Emily to give you an overview on the campaign, and I'll pick up after that. Emily, we're not hearing you. If you're talking, maybe you're on mute. I can see you're running the slide deck.
Sorry. Can everyone hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Very nice to be here. Thank you. So given the times, we know that we can no longer afford to silo our efforts. So our campaign really focuses on aiming for outcomes in drawdown, resiliency, and equity. So some examples of the measurable targets that we would set are tracking meaningful emissions reductions, which support climate action plan reporting, increased disaster response and readiness and resiliency, and increased feelings of belonging and purpose among participants. There we go. So to achieve our outcomes, our working group recommends starting with an accessible, natively translated bilingual online resource. This would allow us to immediately support groups that want to self-organize, as well as support agency climate action plan, education, and reporting efforts. It would also provide the technical resource to build the community leadership program around. So Bright Action is the online platform that we are recommending, which we will introduce in just a moment. It was built to create a powerful combination of high tech and high touch to achieve meaningful, measurable community action. Following the launch of online resources, partners would develop a deep engagement campaign that would be led by paid outreach organizers who would develop volunteer leaders. So there are two elements of our recommended phase one for this campaign. The first is to provide a central landing page that hosts robust engagement resources, which would include sample engagement plans for communities, schools, and teachers, curriculum with quizzes, videos, and games, a focus on carbon footprint, solutions, and benefits, and the ability for that to evolve with the engagement plan development. And then the second element would be 6 county action sites, which would be built on the Bright Action platform to serve as the technical support and action tracking space for community leaders and residents. So I'm going to pass this back over to Kirsten to briefly walk us through the Bright Action platform.
Great. So Bright Action is a platform that's in use in over 30 communities and states around the nation. The platform's goal is really to support leaders and individuals and teams to learn together and take action to reduce emissions and prepare for climate change. With Carmel's support, a specific Monterey County site would be set up and customized for Monterey County. We did provide a deep dive demonstration, and there's a link that we'll provide in the notes if you want to actually look, hear the developer go through the whole site, but we're going to do a few screenshots to give you a taste today. This is an example of the platform as it's been set up in Contra Costa County, and they can have specific city pages. So this is a City of Moraga page. On it, you can see the dashboard of city goals, outcomes, and impact right on the front page, and it's customizable with local photos. Emily is pasting a link in the chat of our deep dive video. If you'd like it, it'll also be in the notes. Next slide, please. So the platform allows, folks get invited by their church leader, by their book group leader, and when they do, they can enroll in the challenge. Often it's called the Green Challenge. This is an example of my account page. Once on, if they want, they can calculate their carbon footprint using a simple 6-question survey or uploading their utility data, but both are optional. It then shows you how you compare to your neighbors, the nation, and the world. It also tracks your progress in reducing emissions as you take action, and your emissions are fueled by your local power mix, so it is customized per city. Personal data security is high, as Bright Action itself does not release specific participant data to us as program managers, only the roll-up data. It does provide emails so the program can contact participants. Next slide. Users can select which actions to learn about, pledge to do, and complete. And the actions are presented in 2 ways. This slide shows actions organized by categories, which may be of special interest to users such as families, food and waste, a section that's for people new, just getting started. So, and the agency can point folks to different ones for different campaigns. For example, if you wanted to have a Be Water Wise month as the hot weather starts happening. Next slide. The second way people can access actions is that you can sort it by a range of criteria that fit your situation, and you'll see these across the top of the slide, such as cost, the level of impact you want to have, how hard the actions are, and if it's renter friendly or not. This allows people to meet allows us to meet people where they are and ensure actions are available for everyone to take their next step, from someone just starting to an already engaged person considering expensive, difficult home electrification. In this screenshot, the actions recommended are selected for a renter who wants to maximize their impact and is willing to take on a medium level of difficulty, but can only spend $100 or less. Next slide. While the platform provides a robust set of actions to start, Monterey County and cities can add specific actions, as well as adding customized information to each action to provide localized resources and directions to residents. Here is an example of an action close to Carmel's heart as a leader in banning single-use plastics in our region, is reducing packaging. Here, somebody has selected on, they want to skip the packaging as their action. They can see the impacts and points earned for taking the action, and they can click Get Started to pledge to take the action. And then I think, and then go to the next slide. For each action, there is additional information provided, and local resources can be listed once a custom site is set up, such as linking to the Carmel ordinance or listing shops where reusable wares are sold. Next slide. I'm just realizing my notes didn't print out. Class passes. Bright Action is also mobile enabled through your browser on your mobile phone and is 100% in natively translated Spanish at the click of a button. Next slide. Now I'm looking at my top points. So I don't know, Emily, let me know if you're supposed to be picking these back up now, because my notes didn't print out past this page.
I can pick up this the next two slides.
Thanks so much.
Sure. So to conduct the initial organizing and stand up this online resource for phase 1, we'll need to bring together approximately $140,000 in launch funding. So we have $80,000 committed to date, and we will be able to launch the platform in Ventura, San Luis Obispo counties for sure, with Santa Barbara and Santa Cruz counties looking very likely. For Monterey County to have a site, the cities and the counties will need to secure $27,000 in funding pledges during this fiscal year to launch with others. So the timeline is focused on having resources in place so that an online campaign can be run on Earth Day next year. So the benefits of joining for the City of Carmel are that it provides a central information resource for the community leaders on adaptation and disaster response. Those actions are going to be added into the platform next month. This also meets Climate Action Plan outreach goals and helps to track citizen emission reduction. It leverages Climate Corps and Civic Sparks and interested community leaders to enroll others to achieve climate action. And we will compensate justice groups to add equity actions into the platform as well. So Kirsten, I'll pass it over to you to wrap it up.
And yeah, so thanks so much for just getting a super quick taste of an overview. I think just to kind of recap what we told you and what we're thinking is there is movement, I think very likely across the whole Central Coast to launch a county-specific Bright Action platform by spring of next year. We would also have one central landing page, and we would be providing some social marketing and media support to start. The goal ultimately is to develop the deep engagement campaign where we get additional funding to hire organizers that can go out and really engage the community. But meanwhile, people can, anybody that's self-interested, your book group, your church club, your public agency staff could get folks organizing teams, and you can also just run social channels. So the question kind of in front of Monterey County right now is, do you want to join in? And I know Carmel's part of Monterey County, but not all of Monterey County. And Ashley Paulsworth is doing a great job of engaging all various cities to look at how they can contribute. And she's looking deeply at how the county can contribute as well. So it's looking like it's possible for Monterey County to come in, and Carmel's support could make a big difference. So with that, I think we gave you a very brief taste of the platform, and just letting you know this is happening hopefully in Monterey County, likely in most of the other counties in the Monterey Bay. And yeah, we'd love to have you be part of it. And we can open it up for questions, or we can just leave it at that. And we're happy to come back, whatever works for you, since we're right at 6 o'clock at this point. And thank you, Emily. Great job presenting.
Yeah, great job on the presentation. It's good to know that this is coalescing. So very interesting. Thank you. Any questions for the...
I have a question about how far are you in your discussions with Monterey County as opposed to the individual cities within Monterey County?
So Ashley Paulsworth was the one that set this meeting up. She actually, and I don't know all the details, because she's been working with folks like Agnes. She actually, I've been working with Ashley. She wants to see it go forward. She actually sent out a suggested funding set to each of the cities to say, hey, can we move this forward? I know she sent a certain amount to Carmel. I don't know what that is. She's kept all that private, which I think is appropriate. She's also working hard to see if she can match any amount of city funding that comes in, but I don't think the county can pay for the whole thing. So she's been involved. Several of the cities, Greenfield, Salinas, Soledad, I think are some of them that have been participating in these presentation meetings that we've been having all summer on it. So there's definitely some momentum going, and Ashley is really working to move it forward. We were going to present to her Climate Action Plan Committee, but because of Brown Act stuff, it got rescheduled. So we're going to be doing that shortly. And we're meeting with San Benito on Friday, and Santa Cruz is pretty close to being wrapped up. So for Monterey County, I know Ashley Paulsworth is very actively kind of organizing it. I wasn't sure she'd be here tonight.
Are you meeting with staff or with elected officials or committees like ours in these other communities? I'm sorry.
Counting on Ashley Paulsworth to kind of lead for Monterey County, and you're the first public committee we got invited to present to. We're going to be presenting to hers as well. And other than that, it's kind of staff that are looking within their budgets to see if they can find funding, and where they need to go to a more elected body to request permission, then they're leading on that. And we may do a little recording of this presentation, because honestly, to go present to 20 some cities in all the counties in the Bay Area is very challenging to do for this amount of funding, especially. So we're really putting all the funding we're raising into the actual platform and organizing, getting it customized. We've been working for a year and a half with no funding to try and advance this because of the importance of activating our community and the complete lack of a resource like this.
Right.
In really anywhere, So.
Well, from the brief overview that you gave us, it looks very exciting. First of all, it looks like it's something that would be a great resource and something that I think we as a committee should definitely consider and further our discussion on the issues.
Great. So I forwarded already to Agnes and then Evan, basically our slide deck, but with our talk points. And within those, we also have links to a PDF that summarizes the platform, their website that summarizes the platform. And there's actually a generic instance of the platform. That's where I got my dashboard, is you can enroll and then start noodling around in there. You can do your own carbon footprint. You can look at the generic actions. They're not customized with local rebates and stuff, but you can see what the language is on the action set. So
could you send that to, so our conduit, I noticed you putting things in the chat window, but our conduit are basically Evan and Agnes. Could you send that generic stuff to Evan, since he's on the call, and maybe Evan, you could just transmit some of that stuff around to us?
Yeah, we had sent that to Agnes, but we'll re-forward it to Evan today.
Yeah, we got the slide deck. So that we were given a few hours ago. So that was great. Thank you. But just some of this auxiliary information.
Yeah, the links are in there, but let us send you a special email that just makes it super clear with the links for how to find that stuff.
Great.
Yeah, that would be great.
Super.
So thank you very much for coming to present. I share Lynette's views. So this looks pretty interesting, and we'll have a look at it.
Great. Thanks so much. And again, thank you so much for all your volunteer work for the planet and people to thrive in your area. Really honored to spend time with you today.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So the last thing on the agenda is provide an update on community outreach, and we're at 6 o'clock. So I'll just make a few comments. Agnes and I worked on an email, which I think all of you got, for sort of a template email for reaching out to the organizations before November 18th, whatever the date is, 4 weeks from now. So I would ask, so first, are there any, I see Lynette struggling with raising her hand. So Lynette, do you?
Oh, never struggling. Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that it didn't make it into the grid update, but Scott and I met at the end of September and developed an outreach and communication plan for all of the education organizations that we have responsibility for. We had sent that by memo to Agnes and Jeff and Carrie, and it didn't make it into the grid, but part of that plan is to have a contact list, to have those people communicated with through emails and sometimes phone calls, but to invite them and to keep them updated in the same way that we're doing with some organizations like Sunset Center and others, so that they didn't drop off the page. They're definitely still in our kind of view. And the other thing is the Carmel Foundation has agreed, in the absence of any of the meetings that they generally have being face-to-face because of the pandemic, they've agreed to allow us an individualized e-blast 2 times between now and our workshop, so that we can have a direct communication with each of their 3,000 members, which I think is really good progress with them. And then when they do open up meetings again, we'll be able to do some face-to-face work.
So Lynette, you will sort of interface with the foundation to get that email or those emails out over the course of the next few weeks.
Yes, right. We'll send one out either Monday or early next week, and then the next one will be sent out the week prior to the workshop.
That's really great.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Good.
Thank you so much for doing that. And for everybody else, we won't really be managing you, I don't think, in terms of checking up on you as to whether you're communicating with your organizations. But please do communicate with your organizations. Especially, I'll be talking to COD. There were a few things that came up on the list today that COD should know about, that we're thinking about if they don't know that already. And I would encourage everybody who has organizations that are impacted by one or the other of these missions that we have to reach out to them before, sometime in the next few weeks. It's important that we get a good showing. I've talked to Agnes about what she's going to do a little bit, and I think it's going to be a pretty structured version of sort of what we did today, sort of a point by point, go down the list of elements and gather public input. So it should be a good workshop with good results. But we need constituents and players there to get that.
Jeff, do we know how long the workshop is anticipated to be? Is it a 3:30 to 6 time frame? Is that what we're telling people?
That's a good question, and I don't have the answer, but I would assume that that's the case, barring anything else. I see Carrie sort of nodding her head, but I think that's my guess is that's what they will try to do. We'll try to keep it for that one. We'll definitely try to keep it on time target.
Okay. So
does anybody else have any? We sent you this email, and and I hope you've all had time to look at it. If you need anything else, does anybody on the call, you have an organization that the email doesn't work for, or you need something slightly different? Are there presentations we need to do or something like that?
No, I just have a process kind of protocol question. If maybe it's a Brown Act question. If you send the letter out similar to what I've already sent some out already similar to that, but not as detailed with the references and things. But what about encouraging somebody, if they can't attend the meeting that's receiving the communication, to send us any comments they may have that we could then bring up during the meeting? Is that allowable from a Brown Act standpoint? Or
it's allowable. My suggestion, and I'm sorry that we didn't, I'm sorry that Agnes and I didn't have that exact conversation and include sort of something in that email about what to do if you're not there. my suggestion, what works for me is my recommendation for the commissioners is to not carry someone else's water. So I think that's in general a bad practice.
So we should ask them to.
I would encourage them to send their comments to Agnes.
Okay.
Just directly. You can. My experience is you can get yourself in trouble in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. All right.
There's no prohibition against doing it, but I think that's not a very good position to put yourself in.
Yeah, well, it's sort of just a protocol issue. So, thanks.
And again, if you need, if we need to put together a presentation for some big group or like the CRA or the Rotary Club or the Chamber of Commerce or whatever, reach out to me or Carrie or Agnes, and we'll see what we can do. And we'll have this conversation again, probably not next month, but 2 months from now, we'll have this conversation again and see where we are with our outreach and what we need to do as we put the final report together. Yes, Lynette.
Sorry, will the workshop be recorded?
All of these meetings are recorded.
Okay,
So
I just wanted to be
I'm
sure.
sure it will be.
Right.
Okay. That concludes our meeting today. Thank you all for coming. Michael, John, Lynette, Carrie, Evan, it's great to see everybody. Michael, thank you for staying on the call for so long. And we'll see you all in 4 weeks.
All right. Thank you.
All right.